Y'all remember your first crush?
Sure.
Yeah? Mine happened in third grade with Leslie Van Buren. And when I thought back on it, I knew it was for a bunch of different reasons. One, she had freckles, and two, like her last name had 3 syllables, and we had just learned about syllables, and I knew that the more syllables, the cooler like a name. Like 3 syllables is like really big. But the one reason I knew, looking back on it in retrospect, that I had a crush on her was because she was the only girl allowed to play on the all-boys Pee Wee baseball team. And so I knew that to win her affections, I would have to do it through sports, which presented a problem in my family because sports and family of artists is like kind of putting bicycles on a pizza. I mean, it just doesn't go together. Whenever I brought up sports to my dad, he always said the same thing. If you can't hunt it, you can't fish it, you can't build it, it ain't worth doing. And whenever I brought it up with my mom, she gave me the same line too. If you play sports, she said with her Yiddish accent, I could barely understand her. If you play sports, you will get paralyzed. And so for the longest time I thought this paralyzed was like a plague from the Old Testament. And if I ever stepped onto like some kind of field to play baseball or football, this paralyzed, like a pair of pants, would descend upon me like a boa constrictor and just squeeze me to death until I fell over. And so that's why when I found a baseball mitt in the leather pile in my dad's art studio, I took it upon myself. I didn't tell my parents. I grabbed the mitt and I walked down to Bellwood Elementary School, the 2 blocks on my own, to try out for the baseball team. And I stood on home plate with the 9 other boys and Leslie Van Buren while we waited for the coach, and the smell of Hubba Bubble bubble gum and grass-stained denim and the spring air mixed all around us. And then the coach pulled up, Coach Walt, and the smell of him mixed all of us with all of us as he dropped the ball bag right on home plate. He wore a cologne called Brut by Fabergé. You remember that? It was the cologne made famous by Wilt Chamberlain, Muhammad Ali, James Bond. And when I smelled that, I got this kind of like these butterflies, and I knew that this man could take me to a place where I could win Leslie's affection. If anyone could take me there, it was him. Now, Coach Walt was about 12 feet tall, even though about 3 feet of his height was due to his white man perm, which was a hairdo that was popular at the time. And so guys that wore this hairdo, it always made them look like they had a big bowl of wheat-free macaroni salad just sitting on their head. Like a big bowl that kind of you take to like a 4th of July picnic and serve like 75 people. And just like would sit up there. And so he looked down on us and we looked up to him literally. And he looked at us and he said, "Gentlemen, in just a few minutes I'm going to have you take the field and I'm going to hit you the longest, highest hit balls imaginable. Balls that will rise so high they mightn't burn up when they move back into the atmosphere before they hit your gloves. They're called the Major League Pop Fly. And gentlemen," and I like that he calls us gentlemen even though we were kids that slept in our underoos and we were one girl. "Gentlemen, you do not merely catch these balls, it's your job to look inviting. And the invited ball will find its way into your mitt just as sure as hot tea from a tea kettle finds its way to a teacup sitting on a tea saucer." And we were all excited, but he totally lost us with this last thing because we were all Southern boys raised on sweet tea, which came in only one size and shape. The way that you made sweet tea was you took a big frosty glass and you filled it with sugar. You put an ice cube on top, waited for that to melt, and you put a Lipton tea bag in your mouth and you drank the whole sugary concoction down. So we didn't understand this hot tea thing. And so we marched off from the field like we were soldiers leaving the general, and we moved through the teacher's parking lot, and we moved past the outfield, and we walked right up to that school because every time we turned around, Coach Walt had developed this tick, which I call a rock star tick. Men with this white man perm typically, instead of moving the hair out of their eyes like this, had done what Peter Frampton had made popular. They would flick their head like this. And so when we looked back and wondered if we had walked far enough, there would be Coach Walt flicking his head. And so we assumed that we hadn't walked far enough. And that's why we walked all the way down to school. And I know we would have walked through the school because there was a kid with a glove on his head. And we checked the door, but it wouldn't open. So we sat in like this little kid puddle, sitting there, or standing there waiting for the Major League Pop Flies to arrive. And they must have been hard to hit because Coach Walt looked like a tiny dot, and the bat looked like a toothpick, and the ball looked like a tiny dot that had been erased. And it took so long for these balls to arrive that we all got distracted. And that's when Leslie Van Buren said, "My mamaw's a Yankee. She drinks hot tea out of a tea kettle." And she separated from the kid puddle, and she stood up until she looked like a tea kettle. She put her gloved hand out like this, and she put her hand on her hip like the handle of a tea kettle, and all of us assumed that she knew what she was doing, and so we spread ourselves out right in a line looking like 11 inviting tea kettles, just like that, waiting for those balls to arrive. And then we got distracted because they took so long to arrive, and the kid with the glove on his head, he started looking for 4-leaf clovers, and one of the kids started making squishing sounds with his mouth, and I started to look at the sun. And I noticed when I looked at the sun and looked away, this kaleidoscope of bright lights would dance in front of my eyes, and it reminded me of this album I had at home that I got in a couple months before, Saturday Night Fever, with John Travolta, the Disco King. I wasn't allowed to see the movie, but my dad bought me the album. And it was like, it was a double album, all the music by the Bee Gees, all the music of the movie, and in there was an 80-page booklet that showed every dance that John Travolta did. And it had the red footprints for the men and the yellow footprints for the women. And if you followed those footprints, yeah, you could figure out the dance. And so as I looked at the sun and looked away, this kaleidoscope of bright lights, well, it looked like those footprints. And so I would look away, kaleidoscope, and then I began to dance. Look away, kaleidoscope, dance. And I didn't notice that the first balls had started to arrive while I was dancing, and while one of the kids was looking at the clovers, and while one of the kids was making squishy sounds about. And the first ball hit the side of the school so hard that it chipped away part of the brick, and two of the other balls landed on top of the school. And that's when it happened. I face planted right into the grass. I got hit right between the eyes, and I was out cold. I heard the kid with the glove on his head got hit in the arm and wobbled out in the field, and then total pandemonium broke loose. One of the kids said that if we didn't leave the field soon, we'd surely die. And I remember being pulled around to the side of the school, and then I woke up, and I was in Miss Ottenbright's third period class. And Leslie was sitting beside me. There was a film strip on U.S. geographical locations in 1952, and it was one of those film strips where we got to eat in the classroom, and I reached into the Cheeto bag, and Leslie's hand touched mine. It sent a shock through my body, and I looked at her, and she said, I like you. I said, me? And she said, I la 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 la, I really like you. I said, you do? And I couldn't move my hand. She goes, I really, 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 really like you. And this smile broke across my face, and I woke up in Coach Walt's arms, which is a great way to end a little story about baseball, right? And so Coach Walt walked me to my family's house. What's that?
In the South.
Yeah, right.
That sounds good.
Yeah. So the entire team followed behind like a flock of seagulls following like a shrimp trawler. And my mom and Coach Walt delivered me to the front door. He rang the doorbell. My mom comes out. And my mom greeted me the same way she would greet all my coaches during my long and risky sports career. She looked out and she goes, what is this? Because a couple of years later, during wrestling, I would get slammed to the mat so hard I would get knocked out of my wrestling tights, which the coach said was an anatomical enigma, which I don't even know what that means. But he had to deliver me to the front door in the same way. And then in gymnastics, I flung myself off the high bar so high, I hit one of those halogen gym ceiling lamps. And so Coach Preskovic, he was only 4 foot tall, he had to put me on one of those gymnastics mats and pull me out to the car, and he pulled me up to the front door and he delivered me to my mom the same way. And so she opened the door with me in Coach Walt's arms. She goes, what is this? And she took me and brought me in the house, but before she did, Leslie came forward. She pressed her hand to her lips, and she pressed her kiss onto my arm. I knew I had won her affections after all. My mom took me into the house, and the next day, something interesting happened. My dad went to go give Coach Walt a piece of his mind. He didn't come back for 12 hours. But when he did come back, he came back with two very important things. One, he became my Coach Walt's assistant coach, and he would remain in that position until I went off to college. And so I had somehow influenced my family of artists to embrace the sports life just a little bit. And my father came home with a white man perm himself. It was a hairdo he kept up long after they'd been banned from fashion. Thanks.
Awesome.